Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Sports Power Talk right here on 88.1 WZIP. I am now sitting down with alumni of the University of Akron and alumni of WZIP, Spencer Davies. Spencer, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. It's always great to be back home.
I was gonna say, yeah. So it's been a while since you've been up here and pretty much seen the offices and been on air with us. So how does it feel to just kind of be back in where your roots are growing?
Man, it's crazy because that's really where it all started for me, right? So I was doing the same stuff that you guys were doing all the sports updates, and then eventually making my way onto the show. And now I don't like to say it, but 6 years later, 7 years later, I'm where I'm at basketballnews.com, and really achieving stuff that I've really wanted to achieve. And there's still a lot of way to go here, but I'm pretty satisfied with the job I've done so far.
I mean, who's counting the years really much? It's real relative at this point. But you mentioned
Right.
you're at basketballnews.com, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the trade deadline that just happened last week, and I'm really intrigued with where you think a lot of this stuff is going because you've covered the Cavs for most of your career. Now you're working in basketball news. You cover a lot of the NBA as a whole now. So I just as a start, you wrote an article the other day about where you feel the Cavs as a franchise are heading. You talked about Kevin Love and his injury, Colin Sexton. So where with the trade deadline moves now, moving JaVale McGee to Denver, where do you think the Cavs? Oh, let me ask you this first. Do you think the Cavs got better at the trade deadline, or in a better situation than they were?
I don't think that they necessarily got better at the trade deadline, but they did something that was pretty much predictable in getting rid of JaVale McGee, just because they know he's probably not going to sign back in the off season. So why lose him for nothing? They ended up with 2 second-round picks. One is a protected 31 to 46 in 2023, and then the other one is an unprotected in 2027. And as you know, as far into the future as those are, and you don't know what's going to convey and where that's going to help you as far as picking with it. It is a trade sweetener. These second round picks, they are assets that teams use or combine to do moves further into the future, or to help them acquire different assets and different players, as we saw honestly. A couple drafts ago with Kevin Porter Jr. Remember, all of those picks were second rounders that Kobe Altman, put together to move up into the first round and grab Kevin Porter Jr. Now, hindsight's always 2020, and Kevin Porter Jr. is not here anymore. But just as an example of what those second round picks can be used for. But I mean, they took a chance on a developmental big in Isaiah Hartenstein. He hasn't really had too much of an opportunity to show what he's got. But he'll be in that backup center role. While JaVale McGee, honestly, deserved to be playing for a contender the way that he, stepped onto the floor. J.B. Bickerstaff said it was unique and special the way he embraced his role with the Cavs this season. A lot of people thought he wasn't even going to be a part of the team when they acquired him from the Lakers, and he reported to camp and became one of their best veterans on the team. So I think they owe JaVale a lot, and gave him a chance to play on a contender, and they didn't lose him for nothing.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Like the JaVale has been a pros pro ever since coming to the team. Do you think the front office kind of had a hard time moving on from him, seeing how much he really helped this team grow, specifically in Colin and Darius, and even Jared Allen at the time?
Well, from my knowledge, I know that they were hoping to get a second round pick for JaVale back, and they ended up with two. I don't know what the other offers and stuff were, but they wouldn't have minded holding on to JaVale, just because they were never gonna go for a buyout if they weren't able to move him. They would have been completely content to let him continue coming off the bench and being a mentor to guys like Jared Allen and the young guards and Isaac Okoro, pretty much the whole team. So it probably would have gone either way for the front office on their feeling on this. Luckily, the Cavs still do have some veterans. Kevin Love is still a part of the team, as we know, but they did get younger. They're hoping that the team and the young guys were able to take some of those lessons and those teachings from JaVale and use them going forward. Even Andre Drummond too. The guys that bestowed some knowledge upon those inexperienced guys. And again, they hope that they soak that up and utilize it going into the future.
So speaking of Drummond, obviously he has been bought out. How close do you know if the Cavs were to acquiring a trade for Andre?
So from what I heard, there were deals on the table, but for Kobe Altman, he did not want to take back long-term salary money or bad contracts, because we have to remember Jared Allen's going to get paid this offseason. We know he's a restricted free agent, but the Cavs are going to have to pony up some dollars for him. Colin Sexton is getting into that extension, time frame here soon as well. So they wanted to keep their books clean. They didn't want to take back a bad contract, even if it meant getting some sort of asset back for Andre Drummond. I am surprised that they didn't find a deal for Drummond that didn't involve taking on big money. I thought they were going to be able to get back, a young player or a reclamation project. I kept on saying that the Knicks would have been a perfect partner for that, Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina. But they just didn't end up being able to put the deal together or find, multiple teams to facilitate one. So they're going to go into this buyout. They're negotiating it. I'm wondering how much Andre Drummond is willing to leave onto the table. But the reports are that Drummond's going to want to go to the Lakers, and why wouldn't you? There's a starting spot pretty much waiting for you in LA. But he is also meeting with the New York Knicks, the Clippers, the Celtics, and the Hornets. So there's a wide array of teams there, and I'm certain that those teams that aren't the championship contenders, they'll probably try and find a way to get him a multi-year deal, and try to really convince him to come to their franchise instead of taking the little money and going for a championship. But it all depends on Andre's priorities at this moment.
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of surprises me with the rumors about the Knicks and the Hornets is that I'm surprised there wasn't a trade done just for the sole fact that somebody wouldn't want him on the Lakers. So do you think there's a more significant chance of him doing that just because they'd be throwing more money at them than the Lakers would be?
I wish I could answer that question, but I just don't know what Drummond's priorities are. I don't know if he's trying to get that that payday that he definitely was searching for. I don't know if teams are going to give him the money that he's expecting, especially having not played for the last month and a half, and also that he's a center that is getting older and has a skill set that's not exactly pertinent to today's NBA. Defensively, though, he is a huge factor. He's obviously able to block shots, just be that bigger presence in the paint, which can be good for certain matchups that teams can run into in the playoffs. But yeah, no, I don't know what he's expecting, what his priorities are. He could easily, slide right into that Lakers position, like I told you before, because they've been looking for someone more of the archetype of a Dwight Howard or JaVale McGee, and they haven't had that this year with Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell. So that would make a lot of sense there. The Nets are out of the running, I'm guessing, because they've already brought in Blake Griffin and they've been playing Nick Claxton. The Knicks, I think, is a good fit, but I also think to myself, they just got Mitchell Robinson back, and they have Nerlens Noel, so would there be enough, playing time for all three of those guys? So there's quite a few options that he has. It just, I guess, depends on the priorities. Maybe he meets it somewhere in the middle where he gets his money and he also is able to compete on a team like the Celtics. But it's pretty much I don't know where he's gonna land for now. But signs point to LA, especially because he's been in Los Angeles, according to Brian Windhurst, that he's been training there and stuff. But I'm guessing he might take his time.
I mean, and why wouldn't you? At this point, I feel like since he hasn't played for a month, I still think there's a lot of teams that could use his abilities. And a healthy Andre Drummond is better than a lot of the players in the league, regardless of how you feel. So moving on, just one more thing about the Cavs. Where do you see Kevin Love fitting into this team? Like you said, you mentioned with the trade, they got younger. With his calf injury being lingering, do you still see him as a Cavalier in the next coming years?
I do, and it's not even necessarily because they here's how I see it. Maybe they would have tried to trade him because the numbers are very high on that contract, and I believe they increased next year and then decreased the last year, if I'm correct with the way that it's structured. One, they're not going to get back what they want for Kevin Love. They signed him to that deal because they believed he was going to be that guy that they could form a team around, maybe not necessarily build around, but somebody that could be a foundational piece to the team. The problem is that injuries happened very quickly, and it just hasn't worked out the way that they had hoped it would. This particular calf injury seems more like a nuisance and a mental one than a physical one, I think. We have to also remember that the Cavs have a ton of games coming up here just because of the way the NBA, is structuring this second half of the schedule. So that in itself makes it difficult to kind of put him in. And also because, all the young guys are earning their playing time right now, and the Cavs are in evaluation mode, and they want to see how those guys play. At the same time, when you ask how he can help the team, when I talk to a team source, and I mentioned this in the article, they want to see what it looks like with Jarrett Allen and having a floor spacer next to him. They want to see, what it's like for Colin Sexton and Darius Garland to have some pressure relief. You honestly, it sounds kind of silly, but how Dean Wade's been out there on the perimeter and just getting these passes from the guards. That's pretty much what they want to see, but with Kevin. And Dean can provide it, but can he provide it for the entirety of a game? Kevin, they would like to see out there for 30 minutes or so with those starters and giving them an option that they pretty much haven't had all season, and a consistent shooter like Kevin as well, and a proven commodity too. We can't, even though the injury's not been great and he hasn't lived up to the contract status, we can't act like Kevin Love wasn't a former All-Star and didn't, do what he did and accomplish what he did prior to these injuries and this contract. So you know that he is a capable shooter. He is a great defensive rebounder. He is a good passer out of the block. So I'm curious to see what it looks like. As an NBA fan, you hope that these guys get healthy and that you see someone like Kevin Love, really kind of fit in with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, who are really making big strides in these seasons, this one and the past, especially Darius Garland here in year two. They want to see what it looks like, but they're not going to force his hand and force Kevin Love to come back too soon. They're going to let it take its course. I believe that he did participate in practice non-contact.
And once again, we're talking with Spencer Davies of basketballnews.com. So moving on from the Cavs, real quick, I wanted to talk about a couple other teams. So the Nuggets, real quick. They obviously were the trade partner for the Cavs for JaVale McGee. Also, they were very, very adamant on getting another piece to their starting lineup. They went out and got Aaron Gordon for the Magic. How do you think the Nuggets are in win now mode?
I think so. I think that move, just going after a guy like Aaron Gordon, is clear as day that they're in win now mood. And the great part about that deal for them, and they go out and get JaVale McGee, as I mentioned earlier. You don't give up much. You gave up Isaiah Hartenstein, Gary Harris. RJ Hampton is going to be a solid player, but you didn't have to surrender Michael Porter Jr. You still kept him around. So now you're looking at a team with some more versatility. The big question coming into the season for the Nuggets was, how would they replace the Jeremy Grant role? And to this point, they have not been able to do so. JaMychal Green's been great coming off the bench, and he's done some solid stuff, but he didn't have nearly the same foot speed or the same length that Jeremy Grant presented. Now the Nuggets bring in a guy like Gordon, who is pretty much a similar age, a little younger, someone who still has a ton of potential that has to be unlocked. Gordon's not going to be depended on to be the guy. He's going to come in. be a guy who's able to cut to the basket, receive some passes from Nikola Jokic, and throw it down. He's able to be a screen setter maybe for Jamal Murray. You know how good he is in transition. Defensively, is he the best? Maybe not, but he's able to switch, 1 through 4, I would say, and really just be a solid matchup for a lot of these Western Conference teams that they're going to be playing in the playoffs. And not to mention, too, about Aaron Gordon, that he's improved to a 39% three-point shooter on the season. He was very, very bad last year, but he's really focused on his jump shot and, just having another option on the offensive end to let it fly, maybe, 3-4 times a game isn't a bad thing, especially when you have Michael Porter Jr., in maybe similar lineups. Aaron Gordon's going to be able to work with whatever rotations they're going to throw out there. And I think that's a big thing for Michael Malone. And again, JaVale McGee, the Nuggets didn't have a legitimate backup center that was able to give Nikola Jokic any kind of rest because they were dealing with, they had Isaiah Hartenstein out there. They had JaMychal Green in some small ball 5 lineups. They had Paul Millsap take some of that as well. So JaVale McGee coming in there to give Jokic at least 15 minutes of rest and be able to protect the rim, run the floor, get to the basket, on high handoffs, whatever it may be. That's a big piece. And then another one, too, that came from the Orlando trade that I think could be like a Torrey Craig-like presence that the Nuggets haven't had this year is Gary Clark. His shooting's been, less than desired this season, but he's proven that he's able to knock down shots when needed. But his defensive versatility and just the strength that he has as a defender and the way that he keeps up on the perimeter, I think is a really underrated part of that deal as well.
So on the opposite side of that deal, you have the Orlando Magic, who have had problems with injuries. Markel Fultz and Jonathan Isaac, two of their young core players who they're building around the team. They have kind of went in the opposite direction of the Nuggets and kind of decide, okay, I think it's time to take a step back and rebuild. What do you think the Magic are? Do you think the Magic are kind of taking a step back this year with, I think, the special year during COVID?
Oh, they're definitely taking a step back. I think the general manager this morning grabbed him and said that they looked in the mirror and asked themselves if they were a championship contender. They said no, and from that, just decided to blow it up. I think the writing was on the wall as soon as Aaron Gordon requested the trade. You realize that you have Evan Fournier coming up on a deal that's going to be expiring. And then, at that point, you're thinking to yourself, Nikola Jokic, he's a great player to, build around, but do you have the pieces to do it? So they just decided to literally blow it up. I mean, I can't remember the last time a team changed their roster this much. Maybe it was the Cavs in 2018. I don't know, but that was a different circumstance. But they send out their 3 best players, and they get back some young talent. I'll give them that. I don't know if they got back what they should have gotten back for a player the caliber of Nikola Vucevic. I think they did fine in the deal for Aaron Gordon. They get back, picks. They get back a guy like Gary Harris, who's a solid, 3-and-D guy. Granted, he can find the jump shot and stay healthy. Wendell Carter Jr. is an interesting one from Chicago, just somebody who never could stay healthy and really didn't get much of an opportunity to be the starting 5 there. There's definitely potential there. He's just got to find it offensively and be able to also stay healthy. And then R.J. Hampton, I think, was a solid pickup that they got. I am interested to see how R.J. Hampton, Markel Fultz, and Cole Anthony all work together, though, just because they're all guards. None of them are like true point guards. They're very combo guardy. But we could see some 3-guard sets in there. Obviously, the Magic are going to wait on Jonathan Isaac to get healthy. I think there's a lot of stuff that could come from Chuma Okeke, who's probably going to get a boatload of minutes here in the second half of the season. the picks that they got back from the Nuggets was pretty good. The top 5 protected 2025 in the future is good. The Bulls picks are both protected as well. The one next year is top 4 protected, so that'll probably convey from Chicago. But I think they did okay. I don't think they did perfect, but it's never really going to go ideal when you're rebuilding. I mean, shoot, just look at what the Rockets ended up with for Victor Oladipo. I think that the Magic did a ton better than they did. And they just completely revamped their roster, and we'll see what direction they go. I don't know if Steve Clifford's going to be the long-term answer there now, because I know he has an affinity for veterans. So we'll see where it goes.
All right, Spencer, last question, kind of just for fun, but as we move towards the close of this wild year for the NBA, second half of the schedule just really started to begin. Do you see the Cleveland Cavaliers sneaking into that 10 spot for the play-in game for the playoffs?
Well, you can rule out I think you can cleanly rule out the Magic from that conversation. The Raptors, I'm surprised didn't get rid of Kyle Lowry at the deadline, so they're still going to be in that hunt. Chicago, I think, is going to bolt up to at least 4 or 5 in the East with these moves. It'll be tough to get to 10, but at the same time, you look at it, they're only 2.5 games back from Chicago at the moment. Cavs have 17 wins, guys. They had 19 last season, and they still have a ton of games left too. So I think that they could. Will they is another question. Do they stay healthy? Are they able to, continue to be defensively oriented? Are they going to continue to try and get those 3-point shots up? What's the rotation going to look like? I unfortunately do not have a crystal ball, but I think that they'll be in contention at least until the very end of the week. And if they do get in, it would not surprise me. But you got to look at teams like Boston and Indiana who have been floundering, and you think they have to figure it out, right? Charlotte's an interesting case study, especially if LaMelo Ball doesn't return. Maybe that's the one team that starts to plummet. But I think it'll be between Cleveland, Toronto. I don't know about Washington. Washington's starting to go back down into the dumpster again. So they'll be in contention for that, 10th, 9th spot. I can't commit to say that they're going to do it. It'd probably be more beneficial if they didn't do it to get a draft pick. And I'm never one to advocate for, a tank per se, but, maybe playing some of those young guys, getting them some meaningful experience, and getting, wins, but it's a hard balance to maintain. Because, I mentioned in the article, man, they got the 8th pick, the 5th pick, and the 5th pick in the last 3 years. And they still had, one of the worst records in the league. So Kobe Altman's not going to depend on lottery luck. At the same time, I think this is a time that you need to continue to develop your young guys, and maybe take away some minutes from any of the older guys like Kevin Love. And I guess that's one of the only older guys left. But maybe take a look at some of these guys off the bench in Dean Wade and Lamar Stevens, Broderick Thomas, who's made a little bit of an impact. He's come to the team on a 2-way deal. Get a look at those guys. See maybe where Darius Garland and Colin Sexton can take you. Jared Allen, they're really happy with. So it's a delicate balance to maintain between trying to get a solid superstar in a draft and also trying to develop while winning. Not an easy job, I'll tell you that.
And I don't think it will ever be easy. Nothing's ever easy in Cleveland. So we have that to look forward to at least. It's going to be fun down the stretch watching these guys grow together. Spencer, I would just want to thank you so much again for coming up here and talking to us. We really appreciate your time. Where can the people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Spin Davies. I'm on Instagram at Spin Davies. Of course, follow our work on basketballnews.com. We have so much on there. We covered the trade deadline so well. So make sure you check out Nekias Duncan and his trade grades, Chris Sheridan and his winners and losers of the NBA trade deadline. We also have a podcast network. I have my own podcast with Brian Fritz called Keeping It 94. So if you could rate, review, and subscribe that and listen to it, that'd be greatly appreciated. And once again, just follow us on our social platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. And yeah, again, just basketballnews.com. We're pretty much an up-and-coming site. We've only been up for about 4 or 5 months now. I guess a little longer than that, 6 or 7 months. But we have former players, we have former coaches, former agents and executives that are contributing to our website, along with myself, Alex Kennedy, and Nikias Duncan as the, quote-unquote media personnel. So, yeah, make sure you head over there and, give us a follow.
Spencer, I love your work. You guys do a great job up there. And well, just once again, thank you for coming up. It's been fun reminiscing. I hope you had fun coming back up here and just talking from the old roots. Once again, thank you everybody for tuning in. This was Spencer Davies. Spencer, we'll see you next time. Maybe we'll do it again soon.
Sounds good. Go Zips.
Go Zips indeed. Thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.